Fen, Hellebore borderlands, on foot. His feet hurt in the specific way that the two toes on his right foot no longer exist. That is, the way that absence hurts more than damage, the ghost of the missing toes sending complete signals to a nervous system that hasn't updated its map. The field surgeon who took them said this would stop after a few months. It hasn't stopped. It's been 4.5 months. He walks with a slight lean to the right to compensate. The borderland trail runs northwest through the lower forest, then opens to a gravel ridgeline, then drops into the valley where the transit camps are. He knows this because of a man named Breck, who was in his conscription cohort, and who deserted 3 months before Fen did, and who managed to get a message back. One message, through a chain of 3 intermediaries, that said, "Keep to the lower forest, avoid the ridgeline at night, look for the light cluster in the valley." Breck was 17 at desertion. Fen is 17 now. He does not know if Breck made it. He walks. The lower forest is pine and frost and the specific cold of early spring that is different from winter cold. It has warmth in it somewhere, theoretical warmth, warmth that hasn't arrived yet but is coming. He knows cold. He spent 2 campaigns in the Hellebore Highland operations, where the cold was not theoretical. This cold is manageable. He manages it. What his mind keeps doing, what it has been doing for 12 days since he walked away from the garrison, is returning to the farmstead. Not in memory exactly. Memory would mean he was thinking about it, choosing to examine it, constructing a narrative. That's not what happens. What happens is heat, suddenly, on the left side of his face. The smell of burning wood that is different from the smell of a managed fire. That particular sweet, sharp smell that has nothing controlled about it, nothing domestic. The sound which he can't describe and doesn't try to, which is more a feeling in the chest than a sound. He walks until the heat sensation passes. The farmstead was in the Hellebore eastern borderlands, in a village called Asel's Crossing, and what happened there was a function of a theological determination made by the Hellebore High Council 14 months ago, which Fen doesn't have language for beyond wrong. He had not been a person who thought in terms of right and wrong before Asel's Crossing. He had been a person who did what he was told and kept his head down and waited to complete his service term and go home, except that the service term kept extending, and home had started to mean something different from what it had meant before. After Asel's Crossing, wrong was the only word he had. He stops on the trail and listens. Footsteps behind him. No, it's the wind, or an animal. He's been making this mistake for 12 days. Hearing footsteps in the wind, in the movement of the forest, in his own heartbeat. The garrison will have noticed his absence by now. They will have marked him. He knows what happens to marked deserters from Hellebore conscription. There's a process, a public theological process, which is worse than what happens to deserters from most other armies, because in Hellebore, desertion is a spiritual transgression as much as a military one. You didn't just leave your unit, you refused your cosmic duty. The High Council theologians had written extensively on this. His pack weighs 14 kilos, which he'd calculated before leaving, the absolute minimum for 12 days, water filtration, the food he'd taken from the garrison stores in small amounts over 2 weeks, so no single day's reduction would be noticeable. He'd been methodical about this. He is good at being methodical when it matters. He had not previously thought of himself as good at anything in particular, but the process of planning a desertion turns out to require a specific kind of careful thinking that he appears to have. He wonders sometimes if he would have been a different kind of soldier, if the war had been different. He wonders if the question makes sense. The trail opens briefly at a stream crossing, stepping stones, ice-rimmed, the water lower than it would be in a month when the snowmelt comes in. He crosses carefully, shifting his weight to compensate for the absent toes, testing each stone before committing his weight. This is a thing he has learned to do without thinking. On the far bank, he stops and checks the bandaging on the right foot. Still dry. That's what he needs. Dry. The infection risk is real. He knows this because the field surgeon told him when he took the toes, and Fen had listened, the way he'd learned to listen to information that had a direct bearing on whether he stayed alive. Keep it dry. Change the bandage every 2 days, or every day if possible. Signs of infection, heat beyond the normal phantom heat, redness that spreads rather than stays local, fever. If any of those, find a medic immediately. He has 3 spare bandages. He changed the dressing this morning. The camp he's heading toward has medical services. That's in Breck's message too, indirectly. They have people who help. He doesn't know more than that. He drinks from his water filter at the stream and keeps moving. The farmstead smell comes back at the top of the ridge, left side of his face again, the phantom heat, and this time he can feel the specific texture of the air that night, which was not the air of a cold spring but of early autumn, and the particular quality of standing at the edge of something and not being able to move. The garrison had positioned itself along the western tree line. The orders had come through the spiritual authorities, not the military command, which was how operations in the Hellebore eastern borderlands worked. The spiritual authorities determined the theological necessity. The military executed the determination. Fen had been on the perimeter. He had not been in the village. He keeps that distinction. He doesn't know if it holds. The trail along the ridge is exposed, the way Breck warned, and he keeps his pace up. Not running. Running is noise and energy expenditure he can't afford, but fast enough that the exposure doesn't last. The ridge gives him the valley view, which is the first time he's seen the valley, and it's bigger than he'd imagined it from Breck's description. A wide, flat basin, with the river running through it, and the camp visible as a cluster of structures that have the particular quality of being built to be temporary, but have been there long enough to look like they intend to stay. The lights are the thing. He hadn't expected to respond to them the way he does. A physical thing in the chest. Not sentiment exactly, but something adjacent to sentiment. The recognition of being a person who has been in the dark for 12 days and is now looking at light that means people, means warmth, means the specific human infrastructure of being fed and not dying in a forest. He's 17. He's been in 2 campaigns. He's been to Azel's Crossing. He's lost 2 toes and gained a directional lean and a habit of flinching at sounds in the wind. He stands on the ridge for a moment, which he knows he shouldn't do, and looks at the lights. Then he begins the descent. His right foot hurts. The ghost pain and the real pain together, indistinguishable. And the descent is slower than he'd like. But he's close enough now that slow doesn't matter. The camp is visible. The light is real. He can make out movement, the shape of people like cook fires, the practical human geometry of a community that is cold but managing. He thinks of Breck, who might have come through here, or might not have. He thinks of his mother in Hellebore, who doesn't know he's alive, who he can't tell is alive, who by now has probably been told by the garrison that he's a deserter, and will have been given the theological framework within which to understand what that means. He thinks about whether she'll use that framework, or whether she has enough of her own to push back. He doesn't know. He can't know. The trail levels out in the valley, and the camp is close, 300 meters maybe. He can smell the cook fires now, the specific smell of other people's food. His last ration was this morning, half of his second-to-last flatbread. He'll reach the camp before he needs to eat again. He adjusts his pack and walks forward. The lights are yellow-warm in the early spring dark, and he keeps his eyes on them, and his right foot hurts in the way that 2 toes hurt when they're no longer there, and the smell of the cook fire gets stronger, and someone is moving at the perimeter, a figure, indistinct at this distance, and he keeps walking until the camp resolves into the specific shapes of tents and structures, and a gate that has a person at it with a clipboard and a lamp. He's here. He's been walking for 12 days. Before that, 6 days hiding in the transit zone after Azel's Crossing. Before that, 3 days at Azel's Crossing itself, which is a thing he is not thinking about right now, because thinking about Azel's Crossing while walking downhill toward a refugee camp in the dark does not help him walk downhill toward the refugee camp. He has done a precise cataloging of what he has. 1 pack, approximately 7 kilograms, including everything he can't leave behind. The pack includes his documents, original garrison papers, and the altered civilian papers Breck helped him with before Breck disappeared south, and enough food for approximately 4 more days if he's careful. A first aid kit that is 3/4 depleted. A knife that is not a weapon, officially, because it has a wood handle and is the kind of knife you carry for camp use. 1 additional pair of socks, currently his most prized possession. He does not have a plan beyond the gate. This has been the plan for 12 days. Reach the gate. After 12 days, the gate is here. He's been telling himself that having a plan for what comes after the gate was not relevant until he reached the gate. And he reached the gate. This is both true and a mild deception he has been using to keep himself moving. The deception is done now. He needs to figure out what comes after the gate. He knows. He will say Breck's contact name. After that, he doesn't know. He will figure it out in the camp, one day at a time, with the specific patience of someone who has been doing things one day at a time for the past 4.5 months. He can do that. He's been doing it. What he has, not in the pack, but in the other inventory, the one he's been taking since the first day after the crossing, is he knows how to work. He has learned in 8 months of moving through conditions that required practical competence or death, how to be useful. He can fix things with his hands. He knows how machinery works in ways that the garrison's training hadn't been specific about, but that had transferred from his father's workshop in the village, from the summers spent learning the functional logic of tools and mechanical systems. He knows how to observe, without looking like he's observing, which is a garrison skill that has now become a camp skill. He knows how to read a space for its pressure points, who has authority, who defers to who, which neither met, and which aren't. These are his resources. They're portable. They cross the border with him, which the physical things in his pack could not be guaranteed to do. He also has the names of 32 people from his cohort and adjacent cohorts, attached to specific places and families and plans. He has been carrying these names the way you carry a specific category of burden. Not in the place where you carry the weight of your own movement, which would be unbearable, but in a specific separate place that you maintain carefully and that can be set down to be dealt with later. He has been carrying them for 8 months. He can carry them longer. He doesn't have a plan beyond here. He has a name, Breck's contact name, which Breck had given through the chain of intermediaries. And he has the things in his pack, and he has the specific knowledge that staying in the forest is not survivable, and this is. He goes to the gate.